for a while now, I've been saying that I will herbicide the other field, right? I'll herbicide that 75-acre field. But I was thinking about this, and I have determined that what I'll do is early next year, I will buy a new truck, right? I've been talking about the idea of buying a new truck, and I'm looking to buy myself a new truck. But the whole thing is I'm not going to buy myself a new truck until I need it, right? That's the whole shebang. And early next year, when I buy that new truck, I'll just haul my tractor around, and I'll just because I was like, if I'm going to pay $4,000 to herbicide that field, and I need to herbicide that other field, and I need to go over there, I got that 190-acre field, and I need to pull those trees out of the field, then I should just take that 10 grand. I should just take that 12 grand. I should just take that 20 grand and buy myself a truck, buy myself a big truck, and just go over there with my tractor and do it myself, right? And that would actually end up saving me, and I was talking about this whole thing, like it's gonna end up costing me like 25 grand. But if I go out there by myself on my own truck, it'll cost me maybe it's gonna cost me like maybe 20% of that, all right? And my whole thing about buying a new truck is that I'm not going to pay cash for a truck. Why would I do that? The only reason that I would do that is if I got a very big discount. Because my whole thing is I would just buy it on credit. I have fantastic credit, right? My credit is very good. So I mean, why would I pay cash for something if I'm gonna get 0 to 3% interest for 6 years? Why would I pay cash, right? I mean, why would I do that? The only reason that I would do that is if I got a major discount. And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, you know what? When I get my new truck, I'm just gonna go over there with my own tractor and just pull all the trees out of the ground and herbicide everything myself. And that'll just cost me like hardly nothing. Because the whole thing about the new truck is that I have I've taken a look at this whole thing, and I've determined that if I sell 10 big animals on a monthly basis, right, here in about 5, 6 months, 5, 6, 7 months, something like that, the whole thing about it is the cattle market's been tanking very quickly, and that kind of it just it put my balance sheet in a little bit of not in a pickle. It just slowed my roll for a little bit, but I'm not concerned about it. All right, realistically, if I thought it was going to take me 5 months, now it'll just take me 7. I'm not concerned about it. It's whatever to me. And my whole thing about buying a new truck is that if I'm selling 10 animals, right? If I'm selling 10 animals at a time, right now I'm selling about 5 animals at a time, and I can haul 5 animals in an F-150 no problem. And if I I can bring home about 10 small calves, in my small trailer by myself. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. And so my whole thing is when I start selling 10 animals at a time, I will actually need a new truck. All right, because I'm not going to be able to take 10 800, 900 pound animals to the sale barn in an F-150 in a small trailer, right? I'm actually going to need a big truck. And the thing is, when I have that big truck, I can actually make a positive return with the equipment. I can actually increase the amount of money that I make. And my whole thing is I got a thing that I can talk about to give a better idea of how I see the market here in a little bit. But that's what I determined. Early next year, when I buy my new truck, I can just take my tractor, the tractor that I have, the loader on that tractor can pick up a 2,500 pound sack, no problem. It doesn't lift the back wheels off the ground or nothing. My big tractor has weights on the rear tires, and when I lift up like a 2,500 pound sack, it doesn't even shift the center of gravity on the tractor. Sometimes, like when you're on a small tractor and you're picking up a 1-ton sack, or actually my small tractor can't even pick up a 1-ton sack. It can't even pick up 2,500 pounds. If you actually with my small tractor, if I try and pick up a 2,500 pound sack, the tractor will actually the mechanism will actually the loader won't go up anymore. It'll actually stop the loader from lifting it anymore once it hits a certain weight. And the big tractor, it'll just lift a 2,500 pound sack right off the ground. And even with a 2,000 pound sack, that little tractor, it'll actually start picking the back wheels off the ground, because the sack will actually start picking the back wheels off the ground. So, and I figured, if I can pick up a 2,500 pound sack off the ground with no problem, that big tractor, it doesn't shift the center of gravity on the tractor or nothing. Okay, it doesn't a 2,500 pound sack is not gonna pick up the a 2,500 pound sack doesn't do anything to the big tractor. Okay, and I figured if I can pick up a 2,500 pound sack like it's nothing, then I can pull a little mesquite tree out of the ground, right? I mean, let's just use some common sense. I mean, it's not going to take 2,500 pounds of force to pull a small little rinky-dink mesquite tree out of the ground, all right? And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get myself, when I get my big truck, I'm just going to take my tractor over there, or I can even just call somebody to haul the tractor for me, and it ain't going to be but a couple of $100s. I could even do that. I could even do that, all right? I could just call somebody to... And the whole thing about this truck is I can just, if I felt like it, I could even just drive this truck until the wheels fell off. Okay, knock on wood. I'm hoping, I don't want the wheels to fall off tomorrow, but I could, right? I could even just drive this truck until the wheels fell off, and just, go to the sale barn twice a month and sell, 5 calves at a time, and just, just not buy any equipment. All right, and it's whatever to me. I could just call somebody to, whatever, to haul my tractor or whatever it is that I decide to do. I can just do it. Okay, but I can just go and do it myself. I don't need to rent any equipment. I don't need to I don't need to call anybody for the herbicide. I can just do it myself, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. I could probably do it all in a week. It's not a big deal. I'll just do it all myself. And yeah, so that's what I figured. I'm not gonna herbicide the field. I'm not even gonna worry about it. I'll do it myself. Here within a few months, I would reasonably anticipate that I start selling about 10 calves on a monthly basis. And when I start selling 10 calves on a monthly basis, and the whole thing about the cattle market right now is that the cattle market fell almost, the feeder cattle, the CME feeder cattle index fell. I don't know what's going on with the cash market. I haven't been to the sale barn since the last time I went to the sale barn was when this thing, it dipped about 10%. And that's when I went to the sale barn, and I can already tell you that the people aren't going crazy for cattle anymore. That's something that I could see. The feeder cattle market has started to fall. President Trump had just announced that he was going to lower the price of beef, and a couple of days later I went to the sale barn, and maybe about a week after that I went to the sale barn, and I could already tell that people weren't going crazy for the cattle anymore. And so things were just kind of back to normal. And so I'm not exactly sure where the feeder cattle market is in terms of a cash price. Like if I went to the sale barn and, I went to the sale barn and bought an 800 pound steer, I don't know what they'd be selling for right now. Here in a couple of weeks, I guess I'll find out. I'll find out here in a couple of weeks when I start liquidating cattle and I start reinvesting the earnings, I'll find out. So, when the market begins to stabilize, whenever the market begins to stabilize, that's when okay, so just to get a better understanding of all this, okay, just to give a better understanding of all this, I actually came up with this little way of looking at it. So let's say you got Farmer Billy Joe, right? And Farmer Billy Joe has 10 cattle, and Farmer Billy Joe has 10 cattle, but he also does not have any money problems. Okay, Farmer Billy Joe is very on top of his finances. Okay, Farmer Billy Joe, he doesn't go mess around. He doesn't mess around, and he doesn't do ridiculous things with the money. Okay, Farmer Billy Joe only has 10 cattle. I'm not gonna say only, because that makes I'm gonna say Farmer Billy Joe has 10 cattle. Okay, Farmer Billy Joe has 10 feeder cattle. He has 10 feeder steers, and these steers are 800 pound animals, and they are number 1 to 1.5. They are straight number 1 type commodity animals. Okay, and he purchased these animals at a commodity price, and he purchased them, and let's say that he purchased them at $4, and they the feeder cattle market was sitting at $4. This is a hypothetical situation, okay? And I'm making the numbers even numbers to just make the numbers easy, okay? So let's say that Farmer Billy Joe has 10 cattle, and he has number one type 800-pound commodity steers, and he purchased these cattle when the feeder cattle were at $4, and he purchased these animals at 200 pounds. He raised them for 8 months, 7-8 months, and and he has now he has 800-pound cattle, and he has 10 800-pound cattle, and the feeder cattle market is still sitting at $4. So he goes and he sells his animals, and he reinvests all of his money. So when he sold his 10 animals, he now bought 20. And let's say that over the next 9 months, the feeder cattle price falls to $2. So the feeder cattle price has gone to half. And now Farmer Billy Joe has his 20 cattle, and he has his 20 cattle, but the feeder cattle price is now sitting at $2 instead of $4. So when he sells his 20 cattle, he still makes enough money to buy 40, right? Because all of the prices move up and down at the same time. The smaller cattle, the bigger cattle, they all move up and down at the same time, okay? If we ever end up in a situation where an 800-pound feeder animal sells for less money than a 500-pound feeder animal, if an 800-pound feeder animal sells for less money than a 200-pound feeder animal, and that's become like the normal, I will go to the sale barn myself and buy every single 800-pound animal that I can find, okay? That would be irrational, okay? So Farmer Billy Joe sells his 20 cattle, and he's not concerned about money. Why would he be, right? The whole thing about money is if you have enough money, why would you concern yourself with money? And if you don't have enough money, what did you do, right? I mean, you got to figure that out. If your financials are going into the negative, that's very bad. That's very bad. You got to figure out what's happening, okay? You got to get yourself to where you're not going into the negative, okay? That's very important. So Farmer Billy Joe is not concerned about the money. Why would he be? It's a piece of paper. He already, his financials are in good order. He's not concerned about it. He doesn't, it's whatever to him. So he sells his 20 cattle and he buys his 40. And the feeder cattle market is sitting at $2, right? And so Farmer Billy Joe, let's say that over the next 9 months, the feeder cattle price has gone up by 10% to $220. Farmer Billy Joe, his animals would be worth 5% more money. All right, because his animals would be worth 5% more money. But you got to understand, Farmer Billy Joe in this example does not care about money to begin with, simply because Farmer Billy Joe, his personality and his character, and he habitually just habitually makes money, right? That's the thing that I talk about in terms of like legitimately making money. Your personality and character will make you far more money than intelligence or desire ever would. All right, ever. Okay, it's like if you just as the person that you are habitually make money, right? You habitually make money. You don't sell your soul to the devil for it. All right, you can't do something ridiculous to make money. I'm talking about, Farmer Billy Joe is running beef cattle and he's making money, and it doesn't matter how much money you have. All right, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you don't, you have to come to this understanding that you could easily lose $10 billion, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you lose $100, you could lose 10 billion. All right, I mean, it's not. There's no amount of money that will save an idiot from themselves, all right? This is something that's very important. The amount of money is irrelevant, all right? And in all honesty, if you make, $2 million a year, $2 million a year is enough money to make you $1 billion over 50 years, all right? And you have to understand this idea of investing capital and compounding earnings. You have to consider this idea. It's very important. If you don't understand that you can take your money and buy something with that money that is as valuable as that money, and that money itself does not make you a positive return, but assets do, right? Assets, good asset will make you some kind of a return, right? And, you have to start thinking about investing capital and making a return on that capital. That's how you make large sums of money. And in all honesty, $2 million a year over a long period of time, $2 million a year is more than enough money to make over $1 billion. It wouldn't even be complicated. And a lot of people don't even consider that as a possibility. A lot of people, when they see $2 million a year, they think, oh my God, $2 million over 50 years, that would be $100 million. But that's how poor people think. All right. If you had $2 million and you invested $500,000 and you lived on, if you lived on $500,000 and invested $1.5 million over the next 50 years and you made a 10% return, that would turn into like $1.75 billion. All right. And, and assets are a hedge for inflation, right? Assets are a hedge for inflation. Cash is a hedge for deflation. All right. Like when you take a look at my business, if the economy is inflating, chances are the price of beef will also go up. All right. If the economy is deflating, chances are the price of beef will also go down. All right. So in the whole thing about having assets, it's like, and I've discussed this idea. It's like, let's say that you have an asset, let's say, whatever, right? Even cattle are a pristine asset. Okay. Cattle are a very good asset. They're not, the most exciting asset, but they're a very good asset. Cattle are a very good asset. They're a commodity type asset. They're a very good asset. And so if broader asset prices are falling, right? Let's say that you've decided to buy the S&P 500. Let's say you've decided to buy whatever, the QQQ and the S&P 500, and you split your money up between those two evenly. And I also don't suggest, the whole thing about the bond market is that the bond market, I don't really suggest putting money into it because, it's, the bond market, the bond market will give you an interest rate, but businesses produce goods and services, right? Bonds will give you a yield, but businesses will produce goods and services, okay? And you're better off, with something that produces a good and a service than a yield, okay? And granted that long-term interest rates will probably be lower. Granted that we don't enter some, the central bank, printing, tens of trillions of dollars and flooding the economy with liquidity. Granted that we don't end up in something like that. The interest rate will probably go downwards. All right, it will probably be going downwards. So, the certificate price of bonds will ultimately probably go up. And and the whole thing about the certificate price of a bond, and I've spoke about this. If the certificate price of a bond goes, crashes, goes to like $5, okay? Like if the certificate price of a bond legitimately, the U.S. Treasury bonds, whatever Treasury bond you want to talk about, let's talk about the 20+ year Treasury bonds. If the certificate price of the 20+ year Treasury bonds legitimately collapsed like 90%, that would mean that the economy is experiencing hyperinflation. All right, because that's the whole thing about the bond market and the broader asset market, right? The broader U.S. Treasury market. And if you want to take a look at the yield curve, you can just go on the internet and type in yield curve, or you could just type in the what's something you would type into, and it'll take you to the government website. It won't take you to the government website. The central bank is not. The central bank is a private institution. Okay, the central bank is a private institution, and so it will take you to this website, and it's called Fred. And you can look at the yield of all the bonds right now. You can take a look at the yield of the 1 month bond, the 5 month bond, the 1 year bond, the 10-year bond, the 5-year bond, the 30-year bond, and you can go and take a look at what the yield curve looks like for yourself. All right, and and the yield curve, if the yield curve on the long end of the curve should be the yield on the long end of the curve should be higher than the short end, okay? And and the yields on the long end have been falling. And the central bank with their interest rates, they fiddle diddle with the when they lower the interest rate, they're lowering their fiddle, when they raise it or lower it, whatever they do, they're fiddle diddling with the short end of the curve. Okay, so if the long end of the curve is falling, if you go on the stock market and you look up stock market, the ticker TLT, that's the 20+ year treasury bond certificate price and yield. Okay, and you can even go on Fred. If you just looked at the Fred website and looked up the treasury yields, just look up a Fred treasury yields. It'll probably pop up, and it'll give you all the yields on all the different bonds right now. And and if the long end of the bond, if the 30-year bond, if the 20-year bond, if the yield is very close to what the bond, like the 5-month bond yield is, then that means that the yield curve is flat. All right, if any of the bonds on the short end of the curve have a higher yield than the long end, that means the bond curve, the yield curve is inverted. That's not good. Okay, and so if broader asset markets fall, right, and I've spoken about this. The one thing that you don't want to do. The things that you don't want to do, right? I've talked about the things that you don't want to do. What are some things that you should, I would highly suggest, like if you're looking to do well financially, what are some things that you should not do, right? Hang around a bunch of poor people. You don't want to be hanging around a bunch of poor people. All right, there's a reason, there's a reason that they're poor, and it's not because they're a good person. And I'm not saying that to be a malicious person. I'm just being straight off forward honest about this. All right, if you have average IQ, you can find it. You have it. You're smart enough to do just about anything. So, if you focused yourself on doing something good for the world, and you focused yourself on, at least you were going to try, right? At least you were going to try to do something good for the world. And I'm not talking about like, ethnic cleansing. All right, that's, that is, you can't be in a situation where you think that you're going to do something good for the world and then you go and massacre a bunch of people. That's not how it works. I'm talking about like legitimately like improve the human outcome. All right, like do something, that will, help a lot of people, right? Feed people, right? And, improve the way that we do things, and et cetera, right? Society is a very important thing. It's like if we didn't have society, I mean, the quality of life today is drastically, all the money in the world would not have bought you an iPhone 30 years ago. And in 30 years and 40, 50 years, we'll probably even have robots. And, and all the money in the world today would not, the robots that we have in 50 years, the robots that we have, the technology that we have in 50 years, all the money in the world today will not buy you one thing from 50 years in the future. All right, you could, when I take a look at everything, and, in 50 years, we'll probably even have, a halfway decent robot. Here in about 50 years, we'll probably even have a halfway decent robot. 40 years, 30, 40 years, we'll have a half decent robot. We may actually even have people who are, part robot, right? I mean, people, we may even start having cyborgs in 30, 40 years. Like people may have robotic organs. People may have robotic limbs. All right, I mean, in 40, 50 years, people might be part robot, right? And so, all the money in the world today won't buy you something from 50 years in the future, right? I mean, and we should look to make humanity a better place for the most people, as we can, as we move forward, right? And things like communism and socialism are not the answer, okay? Oh my God, if we just took things away from the people who are doing well and then distributed it out to the poor people, that's not going to help anybody. All right, that is not going to help anybody. Communism is not a good idea. If you think communism is a good idea, like this guy, Mamdani, right? He is legitimately a socialist. He even calls himself a socialist, a democratic socialist. That's legitimately the party that he ran for. And my whole thing, it's like if you legitimately think socialism is a good idea, Why don't you, if you legitimately think that communism is a good idea, why don't you just move to North Korea? Why don't you just move to China? Why not, right? I mean, there's a reason you don't go to these places. Why don't you just go somewhere like, whatever, Venezuela? Why don't you just go there yourself? See if it's a magical journey, right? See if socialism is doing anything for anybody. See if communism is doing anything for anybody. All right, it's borderline like treason to America to be like a socialist and think that's and think that America should be communist. That's not good. I mean, if you legitimately think that communism is a good thing, then just get on the next airplane to North Korea. If you think communism is a good thing, get on the next plane to Venezuela. Get on the next plane to China. See what's happening over there. Like in China, 98% of the people are like effectively making like $5,000 a year or something. A vast majority of the people in China are barely making anything. All right, in America, it's the complete flip-flop. 93% it's like over 80% of our population is out of poverty, and even poverty standards in America are drastically better than anywhere else. Chances are, if you're impoverished in America and you're impoverished in China, two completely different things. In America, you still probably have access to clean water. You may even still have a roof over your head. You may even be eating food at times. All right, I mean, it's completely different. Right, America, the quality of life for the average person in America is drastically higher. And if you legitimately think that communism is a good idea, if you legitimately think that socialism is a good idea, get on the next airplane to North Korea. Get on the next airplane to China. Get on the next airplane to Venezuela. All right, I mean, have fun. See what it looks like. All right, it's not some magical journey. All right, it doesn't work. All right, and my whole thing is like, if you're gonna punish the people who are successful, why would the people even want to be successful? Why would anybody want to be successful if you're gonna punish the people who are successful, right? Why would anybody want to be successful? It's ridiculous, right? I mean, you gotta encourage people to be successful. We have to live in a world where people are being encouraged to be successful. All right? Success is, successful people, we got to encourage people to be successful. All right? It's very important. You can't be in a situation where you're going to punish the people who are successful. And a lot of times when you have poor people, there's a reason that they're poor. And it's not because they're a good person. I guarantee it, all right? You can't help them. I guarantee there are, a lot of people where even if you give them, if you gave me $1,000, not even gave me, if I had $1,000, right? This is the big example that I use. If I had $1,000 and you gave some average person, a majority of people, not even average, because a majority of people are average. If you gave effectively anybody else $1,000 and you gave me if I had $1,000 and everybody else, and this is also a very realistic way to look at it, because effectively everybody does have $1,000, right? Everybody effectively does have this money already. All right, and me with $1,000, I would be able to turn that into, I would be able to make such a drastic. With $1,000, I could probably turn $1,000 into $100,000. I could probably even make I could probably turn $1,000 into 50 to 100 grand. I can make a 50 to 100 times return on 1 grand. I can make a 50 to 100 times return on 1 grand, and I would do it with a 100% guarantee. I can make a 50 to 1. I could turn $1,000 into 50 grand. To 100 grand, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 within 1 year. And I would do that with a 100% guarantee, right? I've spoken about this whole thing. Like me, if I barely try, I make 100 grand a year. Barely try. Like even right now, I'm putting in maybe 10%, not even 10% effort. And when you take a look at it, I'm making something like 350 grand a year. I may only be putting in 5% effort. and I'm still making like 350 grand a year, right? You know, you have to learn how to fend for yourself. I mean, you got to learn how to, you got to get after it. I mean, and I would do it with a 100% guarantee, and I'm not being a doofus about it. I'm not being a moron about it. I'm not being whatever about it. It just is what it is, all right? And so, but if the price of cattle fall, and then the herd gets expanded, Farmer Billy Joe is not worried about money, because he just, in terms of his personality and in terms of just the way that he goes about things, in terms of his character, he's not excitable. My whole thing about me is that I'm not excitable, and I'm also not depressive. I only feel one thing all the time, and it's this. That's it. I don't get sad when the market goes down, and I don't get excited when the market goes up, and I don't get my panties in a wad when the markets go down, and I don't go leveraging myself to the eyeballs when the markets go up, right? It doesn't matter to me what direction the market goes. I just run my business the exact same way. All right. And so Farmer Billy Joe, does not have any money problems, and, and in terms of his personality and in terms of just who he is, he just has he's not excitable. He's not depressive, nothing. And so, Farmer Billy Joe, expands the size of his herd, but the price of cattle have gone to half, and he's doubled the size of his herd. So technically he's making the same amount of money. All right. But the thing about feeder cattle is that they're not ever going to zero. Feeder cattle are not ever going to zero. So Farmer Billy Joe has decided that he is going to, just continue to run his business, because why would he care? He doesn't. All right. Farmer Billy Joe doesn't care. All right. The money's not going to do anything anyway. All right. He already has plenty of money. He makes, he lives on $3,500 a month. And even right now, he's probably making close to 100 grand a year. All right. So he makes 3 times the amount of money that he spends on a yearly basis. He makes 5 times more money, whatever. He makes 150 grand a year. And, he spends $40,000 a year. So he already makes 4 or 5 times, 4 times more money than he spends. Why would he be concerned about money? There's no reason to be concerned about money. So he expands the size of his herd. And let's say now Farmer Billy Joe has 80 cattle. Farmer Billy Joe has 80 cattle, and the price of feeder cattle have started to move upwards, right? And the price of feeder cattle go up by 10%. That means, if the feeder cattle price went from $20 to $2.20, the monetary value of feeder of Farmer Billy Joe's herd has gone up by $160 an animal. All right. And so, eventually, the markets are not going, the cattle market is never going to zero. That's the moral of the story. The cattle market is never going to zero. If the prices go down and you expand your herd into the down market, even if you're not monetarily making more money, at least you're not making less money, right? Farmer Billy Joe, and the whole thing is that you really want to be in a situation where you are not concerned about money, because you habitually make good choices with money. If you habitually make bad choices with money, that turns into a major problem. It does not matter how much money you have. It does not matter how much money you make. You can lose everything you have, and then you can just, whatever, all right? It doesn't matter how much money you make, and it does not matter how much money you have. What matters is that you habitually just, don't do, you habitually, have your balance sheet in the positive. And you're also not selling your soul to the devil for money, because, you don't want to be in a situation where you're doing ridiculous things for money, like kidnapping people, stealing organs, right? You don't want to be in a situation, selling fentanyl. You don't want to be in a situation where you're doing stuff like that. All right. If Farmer Billy Joe is selling cattle, okay? He sells beef cattle, runs beef cattle. All right. That's how he makes his money. All right. And so, it doesn't matter. All right. If you increase the size of your herd, eventually the price of cattle will, whatever. I mean, if you just continuously buy into the market, then it doesn't matter, okay? Eventually the prices will go up, and when the prices go up, Farmer Billy Joe will get the benefit from the appreciation of more animals at the same time. His herd will go up by $160 per animal. And if he has 80 animals, it'll be 80 times 160. And if he has 120, it'll be 120 times 160. If Farmer Billy Joe has 700 cattle, it'll be 700 times 160. All right. So, but either way, it doesn't matter. Money is a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. All right. You don't need some excessive amount of money to, to honestly just have a, decent life, good life. All right. In all honesty, once you start making about once you start making once you start making any reasonable amount of money and you've actually picked up good money habits and you're investing some of your capital and making a return on your capital, once you're doing this to any relative degree, right? Like you're actually looking to do it. I mean, money becomes negligible. If I needed money, I could just sell some of my cattle. All right, cattle are never going to zero. It doesn't matter to me. I don't have money problems. I'm habitually just somebody who does not have money problems. My habits keep me in a situation where I don't have money problems, and that's far more important than having any kind of significant sum of money or anything else like that. All right, or winning the lottery or anything like that.